Icon NMR processing will give peak labels that show their chemical shift positions. If you re-referenced the chemical shift scale, these values will be erroneous and need to be updated. The process of creating these labels is called peak picking. There are several ways to do this. Icon uses the command pps to create peak labels. This uses hidden parameters to select the threshold and detection sensitivity. For many spectra, the default values will be fine and no further action needs to be taken. However, the pp command will give you an opportunity to change these parameters and help define the peaks you would like to label. After typing pp on the command line, a panel will open up and show the parameters that controls the selection process. You should first select the Auto Pick on Full Spectrum radio button. This will give you peaks outside of the expanded region you might be in. The more important parameters are the minimum intensity, or MI, and detection sensitivity, PC. The minimum intensity will move the threshold of which peaks are labeled. Note the default for the height of the tallest peak is 15. This is in the field called CY and does not have to be adjusted. To the right of the spectrum, a vertical scale should be displayed. It can be removed and added with the Y-axis button in the main button bar. Changing the value of the minimum intensity to a higher value will remove peaks below that value. Watch as I change MI to 10. Only the peaks taller than 10 now have peak labels. Let's return to PP and change MI to 0. Which is allowed. See how many peaks show. All these small impurities are now included in the peak picking. You need to adjust the MI to a value that gives you the peaks that you want included. Let's go back and set MI to 0.5. This looks like a reasonable compromise between getting a lot of peaks but not every little peak in the baseline. If we expand into this peak region, we can see the lines of the multiplets. Going back into PP, let's look at the detection sensitivity or PC value. The lower the number, the higher the detection sensitivity, and the peak picking will label small shoulders. If we raise PC to a larger number like 100. Watch that the smaller peaks in the shoulders are lost. Going back in and lowering this number to 0.1. These peaks are now labeled. If we lower the MI to 0.1, even smaller peaks are included. If we keep MI at 0.1 but increase PC back to 100, these peaks are no longer detected even though they are above the minimum intensity. The defaults for MI and PC are usually a good place to start, but you will have to decide how many peaks you need labeled and what the best values for MI and PC is for each spectrum. Even with careful adjustment on MI and PC, there will be peaks that are difficult to get labeled. There also might be reasons to skip certain peaks that you are not interested in. In these cases, you can go into the manual peak picking mode by choosing the Define Regions, Peaks manually, radio button and click OK. You will now be in the manual peak picking mode. Note there is a row of buttons at the top of the window. Either button that has a red X in its icon will allow you to delete all the peaks. The first button with a plain bracket will allow you to draw regions where peaks will be detected. This region is in both the X and Y axes, and you draw a box that contains the top of the peaks you want to include. It is okay to draw below the spectrum baseline. But this is like having 0 for the minimum height in this region and you will get all the small peaks in the baseline. Select as many regions as you need to include the peaks you want labeled. You could also just draw a single box to include all the peaks. The bracket with M is a tool that allows you to adjust the regions. Place the mouse cursor at the edge of a region and click, hold and drag it to the new position. One of the most useful tools in the manual peak picking operation is selecting single peaks. These peaks could be below the minimum intensity of your drawn region, or peaks and shoulders that are just not getting labeled with other methods. The icon with the blue arrow above a peak will activate the Define Peaks manually mode. Move the red cursor to the center of a peak that you want to label and click the left mouse button. Be careful positioning the cursor because the software will label the exact point you are on, and not the center of the peak. Note that the peak is labeled in green with M in front of the value. This shows that the peak was selected manually. This distinction will not show up in plots and the manual peaks will blend right in with the peaks picked with PPS, or the other tools in manual mode. You can choose as many peaks as you need with the tool. When you are finished, choose Save and Return to exit the routine. You could also abandon any changes with the Return button. The results of peak picking can also be reviewed as a table of values by clicking on the Peaks tab. A slightly different formatted table of peaks can be printed with our custom command pp_print. Thanks for watching our video on peak picking, and as always, let us know if you have any questions.